All right, good morning, everyone. I hope you had a great first day at OSC. Before we get started this morning, somehow I turned into the announcement guy, so you have to listen to me for babble on here for a couple of minutes. Food today. Hopefully you all turned in your little cards yesterday. We have decided to bring the food in. So the food will be brought in. Even if you didn't order takeout, it will be brought here. We will also try to arrange to have the food right out here in the lobby, so we don't have to stand in the rain and eat. The second announcement is that there are 3 cruise ships in town today, plus 35,000 visitors for some religious event. Therefore, the old town will be rather crowded. It is, of course, up to you whether you want to go there tonight or not. But and also the bus schedule is a bit different because of the amount of people that are here. So be aware of that things will be a bit clogged up. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Michael Meeks, who many of you will probably know. Michael has worked in GNOME, OpenOffice, and then was a leading contributor to create the Document Foundation, which is the organization that is dedicated to promoting LibreOffice. And has been involved in open source for a very long time, involved with the openSUSE project. He used to work at SUSE, now he works at Collabora. And I'm very happy to introduce Michael Meeks, so please come on up, and thanks for being here. And please enjoy the talk.
Thank you, sir. Is there a walkie-aboutie microphone somewhere? I think there used to be one for questions, but I get bored. Or I can just shout, as you like. Over there. Can I have it? Thank you. Perfect. Let me move on. This is what I'm going to say, but I'm not going to say it just now because then I'll have said it. And that would be really quick. So, yeah, here we go.
You are waiting now 5 seconds.
5 seconds. So I would point out that this is a historical narrative. It's not today's world. And the reason that I'll say that is that the OpenOffice project you see today is very different to the one that came before. Nevertheless, it's perhaps useful to understand why LibreOffice happened and what went on. So there are a number of things about OpenOffice in the bad old days that were really quite comic. The first thing was a massive process burden. So it was decided that in order to change anything in OpenOffice, because obviously it was the pinnacle of perfection, it was necessary to write a heavy-duty specification. So, if you weren't writing text, then there was a problem. If you're coding, that's probably bad because you might be doing something wrong. So better to write a specification instead and talk about it. In order to do that, it was necessary then to change the UI to form what they called an I-team, which had representatives of user experience, QA, documentation. They even allowed a few developers in, if you were lucky. And in theory, you sat down in a room, although this is difficult on the internet, and worked up your specification and then had it approved in a very formal process. And this was to lead to quality software. The end goal, of course, was to improve quality. Unfortunately, adding endless process steps to change doesn't necessarily improve quality, it turns out. Which means, obviously, the obvious reaction when you notice your process isn't improving quality is to add more steps. This is what's going to solve the problem, right? And make it more difficult to change stuff, and so on. And so, this is a bit of a problem. In conjunction with that, it was not as if there was a shortage of problems. There really was a lot that needed fixing. The bugs seemed to be everywhere, and there was no lack of people complaining about them, but still changing things was quite difficult. In terms of a release cycle, initially there was a great resistance to having a short release cycle because you couldn't push a boxed set through the retail channel if you had more than about one every 18 months, or so the conventional wisdom went. So an 18-month development cycle, attractive as it is for those people who don't like to get new bug reports, it is a bit of a long thing in an open source world. And that time we were releasing 6 monthly or so. And so what we did was we set up our own branch that backported all the nice features, thank you, from OpenOffice into another thing that was sort of OpenOffice. So all of the Linuxes were shipping that because it was way better. Like for years and years, it had all of the features that were going to come in the next thing, but bug fixed and ready you could actually do it. So the route to market, which was a boxed product, sort of died. I mean, pretty vigorously. I don't know if SUSE is probably still doing it somewhere, but I think we sold it to someone else, right? But going into shops and buying boxes is going the way of Blockbuster. It's on a speedy downhill decline. So all of the Linuxes were using something that wasn't really OpenOffice. In addition to a massive process burden, a release cycle was not helpful, and social problems, it was also very necessary to retain control and ownership of the code. And you could talk about this for hours. But this is a picture of Fedora contributions, and somewhere around here they dropped the requirement of a contributor license agreement that you had to sign first and send off. And this is the number of accounts that are open with people contributing stuff, and this is time. So I think this graph by itself is a pretty impressive picture of what happens when you start to be open and start to have reciprocal licensing that you accept, other people accept, and everyone is on a level playing field, rather than having one special privileged company or organization that wants to own and control everything. The governance. There was a governance set up to make the community happy. The way the governance was structured was quite interesting in itself. So, of course, it's very important that the sponsoring organization, Star Division, had a guaranteed seat on the board. So they have a guaranteed seat on the board. But in addition, the vast majority of people on the board were elected by a slate of people appointed by Star Division. So, and which were, the vast majority of these were employees. So the net result was there was one seat that you could potentially be elected for, which was the, quotes, community seat on the board. I mean, it sounds like a bad joke, right? I mean, I don't know, but these things happen a lot. And the community seat was extremely egalitarian. Anyone could vote for it. Like, if you had only just turned up, and actually, I don't think there was even any kind of admission process at all. You just went to the website and you could vote for who was going to be the community representative, you see. So having put years of effort and work into trying to improve the project, contribute code, my voting representation was just the same as someone who went to the website. That was their main contribution. So this was quite an extraordinary governance, and certainly in TDF, Document Foundation, we made sure that no one organization can control more than 30% of the votes anywhere, because I think that's just healthy. So this all went to build up a bit of a frustration problem. I think the culture is well described by a problem for every solution. I think that's pretty much where we were. Anytime you had a creative idea for how to improve things, like reducing the process burden, say, there would be some horrible problem. And yet, don't let me go too far overboard. There were some wonderful people there in Hamburg. Some great individuals who were charming and friendly, who would even go and write the massive specification for you to try and help you get your stuff in. Who were sort of a firewall between the monstrous mess and individuals. And they really worked hard. These people trying to attract volunteers and get people involved. And I have some great friends from that time. So, however, the big picture one was one of significant problems and cultural, I guess, corporate cultural issue. So eventually, everything came to a head, and we decided that this really couldn't go on. We were actually waiting around, hoping that when Oracle acquired this division, that things would get better. That they would kick its backside and something happened. But it turned out that wasn't likely. So while everyone was going on a boat cruise to the OpenOffice, the OpenOffice conference, there were a group of us that went instead for a private meal and discussed how we could solve this problem. And what we came up with was effectively LibreOffice. And so on the 10th anniversary of OpenOffice, 10 years after it was promised to set up an independent non-profit with a governance and so on, which just hadn't happened, we decided we were going to do it anyway, and invite everyone to join, of course. So this is the 2011 slide, can you blame Oracle? Is it all their fault? And the answer is, of course, no. Basically, we've been waiting 10 years, we were patient. There were some real opportunities, fantastic opportunities, big ones for improvement, right? And really, Star Division had significant autonomy. They did what they liked, and they took the rap for it, ultimately. So, we did this because we wanted to do the right thing, not because we don't like anyone, right? And we'd love to have Oracle involved. So then how do you launch a brand new project with significant reach? How is it done? Well, it turns out there are a number of problems in this. The first thing is you need a press release. Now, writing press releases is quite easy. You just type with both fingers for double the productivity. And I discovered this actually recently. You can speed up. Anyway, you just need to type faster and your programs will be longer. It's wonderful. Anyhow, the problem is not the press release, because that's easy to write. The problem is getting people to back it, right? You need people to sign up. And we had SUSE in one corner, we had Red Hat in another corner, the two main powers of putting actual investment into this. But each of them wanted the other to jump first, right? No, after you, like this, all a bit of a problem, huh? And so, I don't know who remembers Jeremy Allison, but he's a cool guy, and he worked with us at SUSE for a long time. He was a good friend of mine. And Chris DeBoner, of course, at Google. And they provided this just fantastic quote that broke the deadlock. So it's like, well, Google's going, why aren't you, So, Google is proud to be a supporter of the Document Foundation, which at this time, of course, doesn't exist. Like we're just announcing it, So this is... so this lead quote really actually enabled the launching of the Document Foundation, which is fantastic. So obviously, on the other side, then Marcus Ragsky, Jan Williboy, John Blanford, Mark Shuttleworth, Richard Stallman gave us quotes, Simon Phipps, Oasis, GNOME, NeoOffice, various the people at the time that we could round up and encourage to support us, which was great. So we had a great press release. We put that out, and yeah. And then we had a logo, right? Well, so you need all this, marketing and branding collateral, right? And at the time, I was convinced that LibreOffice was a terrible name, and that the logo was absolutely awful. But it turns out that what's important about a logo is not, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm quite attached to it now. Maybe I wear it a lot. I think I've probably got it here somewhere. But it's not just me. If you go to look at the Wikipedia logo page, Wikipedia editors have a fantastic sense of humor, because the three logos they choose are Document Foundation, IBM, right next to it, and then some other random, highly noisy logo. But yeah, it turned out to be good. Very beautiful in its simplicity, and Christoph Nowak is a hero. So I retract my previous negative feedback. So then there's a whole load of being up all night and typing web pages again very quickly with several other people, and Git repositories and GUI mashing things together with other people, and all that sort of thing. And eventually, and pre-briefing journalists, it was great to have SUSE's PR support, Red Hat's PR support, Google prepared to brief people and so on, to go and reach out and precede the story that something's going to happen. Of course, at this time we invited Oracle as well to join and get involved, but sadly due to various reasons they chose not to. So we launched, and suddenly, we're wanting people to get involved. Please, come and help us. The news is out there, it's hot, it's live, everyone is interested to get involved, and we really need people who are actually going to get stuck in and do stuff, right? Because it's all very well writing press releases, but at the end of the day, the code is in desperate need of improvement. So we were extremely pleased, and actually we were quite surprised to see suddenly this huge spike of people that we'd never seen before committing code, actually almost directly out of the box, bang, loads of people arrived that we hadn't seen before, which is, to me, quite exciting. It almost validated what we did. That there was really, and hopefully that you can see the trend going up. I think we had nearly 3,000 commits in February, which is pretty impressive. The Linux kernel, of course, has more. Mozilla has more, but it's getting into the same orders of magnitude of some of the really big, really established projects, which is fantastic. And the other thing you see is just diversity of it all. We have, of course, Red Hat and SUSE, now Calabra. We have Apache, which is, I think, this yellow thing here. And, various other people, multi-coreware, various people doing specific things and getting involved, which is quite cool. And when you look at individuals rather than volume of code contributions, just the dominant body is the volunteers, people that we never saw before the project started. There's another line for people that we did see before the project started. This green one is known contributors, I think. Is that right? Something at the bottom. So they're still around, right? It's not terrible, but there's just a lot more people. And of course, unfortunately, Oracle, chose to leave, I guess, at this point. But we kind of carried on, which is great. So yeah, so that's the picture there. And of course, the news, keeps coming. Lots of marketing. OpenSUSE conference provided one of the first places for us to actually have our first meetup, actually. So this is, I think, probably the first LibreOffice Hackfest come mini conference, which was tacked on to I think, Nuremberg don't know, it was some university or something, wasn't it? It was pretty awesome anyway, and you guys very kindly hosted us way back in the beginning, and this is Torsten Behrens talking about the future. Amazing. So there we are. And this is another slide from the FOSDEM launch, basically explaining why we're doing it, what we're doing. We're doing it right, we're vendor neutral, no code ownership, aggregation, making a real free software project. None of this, fake stuff. We had the FSF and the OSI finally managed to agree on something which was supporting LibreOffice, which was great. We had Boycott Novell and Novell supporting it, which is good, right? I don't know, there's something, these things tell you, that something, the time has come, Free desktop hosting it, mixed licensing. And, what the goal was to make a beautiful Office suite we can actually be proud of rather than kind of embarrassed of, Of course, we're still hoping to achieve that goal, but I promise you, if you go back to what was there in 2011, you'll be, much more embarrassed. And and of course, ODF made it possible to actually get there, to migrate with your data. So then, lots of, sort of public outreach at random conferences, FOSDEM talks, booths, collateral, freedom never tasted so sweet, these terrible puns, that get onto the back of everyone's clothing before you know it. The bags, the lanyards, the USB keys with the software on it, so you don't have to download the Git repository. You can just get it on your thing. The cakes, confectionery plays an important part in Brazilian culture, it seems. Look at that, And so, unless you have a cake with LibreOffice on it, you're just not made it. Hackfests, left and right, Munich and Freiburg and Hamburg, and quite a lot of them in Germany. And in Japan, we had people, volunteers, and of course, it's somewhat difficult often to draw links to Asia and actually interact with people in a very different time zone. But these people sprung up, they're contributing code, they're setting up booths, printing collateral, none of this done by us, just, we see the pictures, right? Which is amazing, isn't it? Just really, really encouraging the enthusiasm and the hard work going in from everywhere. It was fantastically encouraging. So, governance. Here's the boring governance slide. Let me show you how it works. So basically, to make sure that this works, we have a meritocracy. It's necessary to have done something to be able to vote in LibreOffice. I'm sorry about that. This was controversial initially, that you ought to have contributed a certain amount of code, that you ought to make a commitment to sticking with the project for a few months, 3 months we asked for, a nominal commitment. But either way, we then select and review these people, and of course documentation, evangelism, all of these things count. And so we have these members, and they elect the membership committee that then approves them. So there's some circularity in all these things. And they elect the board. And we have an advisory board who provide advice. This has loads of companies on it. And companies are not entirely stupid things sometimes. They actually have good people inside them. And they can provide you with good advice. Like, don't put it all in, emerging country debt, the money, for example. Like this kind of clever advice. And they also appoint an engineering steering committee. There's quite a lot of engineering going on that needs actually very minimal steering, but we'll look at that. So power is vested, of course, in the board, legally responsible, and but really they're elected by the members who, well, everyone that does stuff, which is great. What? Not crashed yet, no. It's my button requires a big push for some reason. Anyhow, so the ESC, I know SUSE doesn't have one of these and decided not to. But we got pretty bored of having IRC meetings in the Sun days, because an IRC meeting is something that's so boring that I just fall asleep in these things. I can't cope, Between each thought, there's a 20-second break, and my brain is completely checked out by the time maybe you could read the log afterwards if you cared. So instead we have a phone-based meetings, and we do those weekly, and it's relatively diverse. There's a whole load of different companies involved in that. And we do everything consensus-based, so we argue, but in the end we agree. One controversial decision we voted on ever, which is when to have 4.0. So, that's kind of fun. And it's packed with the right people. It has everyone, that's doing the key work in QA, user experience, development, translation, whatever. Anything that's to do with the engineering release process, LibreOffice, the people are there. We publish minutes each week. And, yeah, it seems to just work, which is pleasant. As soon as we see some kind of flame war on a mailing list, Because we tend to believe that mailing lists aren't a great place for flame wars. You know, I mean, it's very satisfying, isn't it, to get feel very attacked and write lots of angry prose. And if you're lucky, you can then get angry again as you reread it before you're sending it, and then feel bad that you're cutting out the harshest bits and, you know, all this sort of thing. If you're really in sane mode. But, you know, the bile spewing flame wars, we tend to think that they're not terribly constructive for building a community feeling. So as soon as something pretty dodgy happens, and you usually hope that there's a decision involved. I mean, it's not just like, you suck. Well, no, you suck. It's more like, you suck because you don't like this technical thing. And, you know, you suck because you do like it, and so on. And so hopefully we'll say, okay, you know, wave a flag. We'll have this, we'll discuss it in the engineering steering committee meeting. And you two guys aren't actually on the engineering steering committee meeting. You know, you're not actually doing much. So you can come to the meeting and tell us about why it's so important that we do this or do that, right? And it turns out that when you put people in a phone call and they can hear each other, and they tend to be less bile spewing for some reason. And if you listen to them and you ask them questions and things, often we can come to a compromise that doesn't result in a 1,000 mail spew and a 15-month wait and a whatever, right? So we can make a decision that hopefully compromises. It doesn't always work, but we try. So yeah, shunting conflict off into a better medium for conflict is helpful for us. So the advisory board, you see the lovely logo in the middle. We have all sorts of people here. So this is the Saudi Arabian government, the immortal CAXT. That's the name of the institute. They make nuclear reactors and also LibreOffice. So, you know, you can see the synergies. MIMO is a representative of the French government, which is great, a whole load of interministerial things. Obviously, the FSF, this is a German non-profit around it. SPI are the heroes behind Debian that raise and hold money for us, actually, in the US, and other things. I think most people have heard of this company. AMD and Intel, which is encouraging AMD actually investing a lot of money in development of LibreOffice and improving it for their hardware. SUSE, woohoo! Calabra, Lanido, and Red Hat. So, you know, a good number of companies are supporting, as I say, they provide advice. Actually, one of the interesting things, if you're interested, if you happen to run a company and you have, you know, $10,000 you want to give us, one of the interesting things is that we have a public approach of being positive about competing projects. So, you know, I check them out, they're great, you know. However, it's important to have a realistic approach somewhere that actually measures and looks at all the metrics and the hard decisions we have to make and competitive positions and so on. And you can't really have that in public. You know, like, you can't have a nice thing in public and then do this as well. So these guys get to suffer the hard analytics behind the scenes and to some degree hold us to account and measure progress in a way that we can't really do without looking like, you know, the swines that we really are. Anyway, there we go. So the LibreOffice conference, we had 3 conferences so far. Paris, as you see, we tried to enlarge the number of people by a well-placed mirror. You know, this is a very important strategy. I would recommend it to you. No, I'm not being mean. I really don't. So the next conference was the German Federal Ministry of Economics and Technology. Lovely people, nice building, lots of... and we're getting slightly better at actually the idea of taking a photo. I don't know, this one, you know, almost no one is looking at, you know, in the previous guy. You know, what is happening here? This is not a conference photo. This one is a bit better, you know. Like, I mean, there's still people arriving here who haven't quite got there yet, and most of the, you know, there's people not in there. Now, this is getting there, you know, the enthusiasm, the, you know, the style, but then that's Italy for you. So thank you for all the people there. But the good news is the 4th LibreOffice conference, which will be our best yet, because our conferences get better and better. You know, everything we do, you know, Kaizen, you've heard about these Japanese people that get better and better. You know? So constant improvement. In Bern, nearby, you could go. It's going to be beautiful. Look at it. It looks nice. Maybe fewer castles than Dubrovnik, but you know, it's going to be great. So September is our next conference. Please do come there. In addition to actually making the software, it's nice that people started to use it. I mean, you know, it would be fantastic to have a project like this with this excitement with no one using it, but it's encouraging that there are people using it. So, you know, the small migrations in government, just looking at one sector, you know, Munich using it, Copenhagen, Netherlands Defense, Valencia, you know, some quite encouraging numbers of deployments there. But of course, large numbers of individual users use it, and it's very hard to count them. So, for example, you know, I don't know how many you think there are on the Linux desktop, But the population grows by, 1 billion each decade or something. So, there's probably quite a lot. It's those small percentage games that product managers love so much, when building predictions of the future. You only increase your small percentage by double it, and it still looks small, but it's good for the numbers. Anyhow, so the global Linux user base gives us maybe 35 million, maybe, which is nice. None of that's measured in this. This is just the downloads, and these guys phone home for asking, is there an update? Is there an update? I want an update. What's new? Tell me something. Have you got a new thing? And we get more than 1 million new IP addresses. So not ones we've seen before, ones we've never seen before. More than 1 million new unique IP addresses every week, which we're quite pleased about. And this rate is, double what it was a year ago, and we seem to be going up, which is always encouraging. This is 70 million or so on the vertical axis, which is nice. So, but more than that, quite apart from these, it's getting developers involved. I was pleased Carl Fogel is a great guy and been heavily involved in the Apache project, wrote a great book on how to do open source software, and initially tried to work with OpenOffice back in the day. Basically couldn't, it was really, really hard. And he now says, quote, LibreOffice is ridiculously easy to build. It actually compiles. So, this is usually a good step in getting people into your project, compiling as step one. So, GNU make ports, we can now compile in massive parallel. If you want a supercomputer to be tested, we can destroy your supercomputer for you. We can compile 10,000 wide C++ files, something like that. So we pre-process and build all of our generated code, and then, we can compile just massively, massively wide, which is pretty good. So in about 15 minutes on a beast of a machine, with lots of CPUs, you can go from clean to having a working LibreOffice. And hey, just changing the culture to say, look, we want you to be contributing. It's really important, And so we have a thing called Easy Hacks that makes it easy to get involved, just doing simple stuff. We have code overviews, documentation. We have training slideware to get people involved. Previously, when people built slideware about OpenOffice, often the emphasis was basically machismo, like, it's impossible, you can't do it. Hey, look at this dependency graph, it's so complicated, no mortal can understand it. It turns out it's actually not that complicated. There's just really bad graphs. So with a bit of better graph work and dependency generation, we can now actually show the not unreasonably simple, complicated structure of LibreOffice, which is, I'm clicking my own link. That's silly. Let's try not clicking on the PDF. Perfect. And we start to do features. So interoperability is a pain, so let's embed the fonts. Fonts are a real problem. So kindly funded by the Open Source Business Alliance. Everyone wants to make a slideshow with massive images in it. That 100 megapixel camera you are lusting after? This is a 1 megapixel screen, right? So when you project, you're going to need to scale it down to a fraction of its size using your GPU, which is the best thing, So anyhow, now you've got a 100 megapixel image. You want to put lots of them in a slideshow to make everything ultra efficient. Anyway, so there we go. You can easily do it. You can even rotate images in Word Writer now, which has been a feature we've been missing for years. Beautiful new graphing things, base improvements. We've got a sidebar from IBM and Apache OpenOffice, which is nice. It's actually not even experimental in 4.2. Lots of other integration things, GStreamer, better searching, LibreOffice 4.2, pretty shells, so you can see your recent documents and thumbnails of them. The Android remote, as I was telling Wookie earlier, the Blue Z5 revolution, we've only just caught up with, and not in a way that works with suspend and resume. So, we've just got Bluetooth remotes working beautifully on Linux. Of course, they still work on Windows and Mac, and the API was radically broken underneath us, with no one to come and help fix it. So we've mostly fixed that. But the client is now more beautiful too. It even has this kind of laser pointer stuff, so you can use your thumb as a laser pointer. It's slightly bigger than the laser, but it's quite pretty. Google Drive integration, pretty conditional formatting. There's a whole load of heavy lifting stuff going on, paying down decades of technical debt in Calc. So just a huge team here, turning Calc from this thing that's highly object-oriented. Every cell was an object. So each of them looked like this, with this stack of different types and derived classes and so on. And it turns out this is a disaster area. So instead now we have arrays of flat doubles, which is basically what you want down your column to do any fast arithmetic. and blocks of similar things. Previously, we would duplicate every formula. Say you fill a column full of formulae, each one of those would duplicate every formula twice. Like it's parsed into tokens, each of them allocated separately, just tons of memory wastage. Turning this into something simple like this helps us to see our dependency structures better, calculate more quickly, and so on. Pretty new icons. Firebird database integration. So instead of some horrible Java thing, we have this relatively nice C++ database. New features, OpenXML interoperability. Everyone hates losing data in their documents or it appearing to be broken when you round trip it. So just improving round trip. Things we don't understand in OpenXML, we keep internally now, and we start spitting them out again to repair your file as we save it. So it may not look perfect in LibreOffice, but having edited it, it comes back like it should have been, right? Which is pretty cool. BCP47, aha. So actually this part of the world might be interested in this. So there are some languages that have two orthographies, Cyrillic or Latin, for example, for the same language. And this we couldn't represent before, and now we can. BCP47 tags, we can do that, which is great. A man-year of work for something that's used in just this location, so that's great. What's that? In Serbia, you're right. Not in Croatia, in Serbia. But it's near here, right? You're right. I think it's near here. I mean, my grasp of geography is, pretty tendentious. We are near Australia, right? Is that right? Yeah, okay. Perfect. Import more legacy Mac document types. So I'll talk a bit more about this in a minute. Keynote filter, which is quite good. GNOME 3 menu integration. Improving the UI, so our layout, switching to a decent UI. We're actually starting to nearly get there. When this number gets to the bottom, we're done, which is pretty cool. So new trend lines. Actually, this radical idea of unit testing. One of the unpleasant things about working in OpenOffice was the disdain that professional programmers had for the unwashed masses, like myself, who were hackers, non-professional programmers. Well, since we've started doing all these non-professional things like writing unit tests, which were not really there before, and all of that terrible stuff. And so suddenly we're starting to get much more of the code tested. Every time we break a document is broken on import, we'll write an import test for it. We'll fix the bug, having checked the test fails, and we'll then re-export that document, re-import it, and run the test again. So we're confident that it makes it through save, load, resave, reload, and so on. So increasing numbers of round-trip interop testing. We're pretty excited about OpenCL, right? So I don't know if you've read many graphics libraries or multimedia libraries, but when you get down under the hood, what you discover is that all of them have these hard hand-coded assembler stuff, their inner loops. And it's cool. It makes people like Wookie's job beautiful because every time there's a new CPU architecture, you have to go and write more hand-coded assembler, which is a full employment scheme. It really is good, And it gives some great wins as well. All you've got to do is slightly tweak the CPU and, this hand-coded assembler is no longer as efficient. So, but OpenCL solves this problem. You write in a relatively nice C-like language, like a fragment shader, and then it will compile it for exactly your CPU, with exactly your weird SSE3, Prescott native, whatevers. And it kind of rocks. Anyway, you can read a bit about what AMD is doing with HSA, sharing memory, and so on. And look at it. It makes such readable code. When you auto-generate it, from formulae, I don't know how much OpenCL you've read, but and so it's quite interesting. For a longer sum, you can get this stuff. And under the hood, it's compiled. And guess what? It's even faster, which is amazing, isn't it? So there we go. Unfortunately, it's so much faster, you need a log scale on the bottom. So, when it halves here, that's doing pretty well, right? It's pretty nice. So between 30 and 500 times faster versus the legacy, the old-style calculation on Kaveri. So we're kind of encouraged by that sort of thing. What else? Parallelized loading. So if you've got lots of data you want to crunch, you want to load it in parallel, right? Quicker, get it into the machine. XML is not very quick to parse, so we split the parsing from the interpreting of it and populating the data sheet. So 2 pieces. And you get, effectively, 50% of the work in each. It's quite interesting. We can now use 16, 32 threads, as many as you like, really. We're even compiling to OpenCL while you're loading in the background, which is pretty awesome. And there's another thread that just draws your progress bar, which is important. So you can turn that on. And does it work? Well, there's a reference here. I don't know if you can guess what the reference is. It's another industry standard program used for spreadsheets. And shorter is better. We don't beat the reference in every case, but in some cases, and again, this is a log scale, we're doing pretty well. So this was the old stuff, this is the new stuff, and this is the reference. And so you can see, in some cases, we can load XLSX spreadsheets better than the reference, which is encouraging. So we've also done a huge amount of work on trying to liberate legacy file formats or proprietary file formats so people can actually get their data into ODF and be confident it'll still be there. And we even set up a sub-project now. Look at this beautiful logo for it, inspired by TDF. And this is part of a TDF project, but sort of separate, because the KDE project use a number of these pieces, GNOME project too. People around the place, Scribus uses some of these filters, and we want to be, plural. People don't want to support LibreOffice, maybe, but they're eager to support these filters. So, Publisher Works, Keynote, Visio, loads of obsolete binary formats. Mac Writer 3 or something. You never heard of it, but we do it. Abbey Word, ebook, freehands, and just lots and lots more of this stuff in progress. Reverse engineering horrible binary file formats. What's the future like? Well, the future is mobile. Everyone will tell you that. So here's a picture of an Android version, tiled rendering to make very slick, fast zooming and panning and pinching, operations quick on tablets. Collaborative productivity, just a quick pitch about this, and I'm nearly done. You'll be pleased to know. How am I doing for time? I'm good. I'll slow down. Perfect. So, collaborative productivity, this is the shameless corporate plug. Feel free to leave now. You see? Look at this guy. Integrity. Leaving. And the corporate plug. I love it. I love it. Keep going. Collaborative Productivity is the company I now work for. It's a subsidiary of Collabora, and I would argue we are the leading open source consultancy. We have a mission, which is to make open source kick ass. That's our mission. It's not to enrich our shareholders or to, I guess we want to make our employees happy too, but our primary mission is to make open source succeed as a methodology and get it deployed everywhere. Productivity has 12 certified LibreOffice developers, which is pretty good. We're kind of the place to come, and we fix problems for people. We implement new features, we maintain, do long-term support, and so on. And the team was spun out of SUSE, I guess. 7 of us were spun out of SUSE back in the day, and we're now 14. SUSE really needed to focus. You can't do everything well, it turns out. You need to focus on doing some things brilliantly. And LibreOffice had all this growth potential. There are lots of areas where it can grow, but primarily they're not Linux. Linux on the desktop, sadly. They're Windows, they're Android, they're iOS, they're the cloudy something or others. But this is not a terribly great match for SUSE's business, honestly. And I think this was really the best possible outcome. Spinning the team out rather than redeploying everyone was really the best possible outcome, given the circumstances, given the need for SUSE to focus, which is a genuine business need. It's not something that's optional. You have to do it. I think this really was the best option for SUSE. And sometimes maybe in the openSUSE community you can wander around thinking, does SUSE care about the community? Do they actually, when the rubber hits the road, do they care? And through this process, I was just amazingly privileged to work with Ralph and Nils and Gerald and all the people in the senior end of SUSE, and be just amazingly impressed by their commitment to doing what was right, at least for my community. And I assume this applies to every community out there. In fact, I'm convinced of it. So until the rubber hits the road, you don't see it. But I saw it with a vengeance, and these guys did the right thing. So really kudos to, the only guy here is Jan Weber, so you can buy him a beer afterwards if you if you want to. But it was not an ideal experience, but it was, I think, incredibly impressive from the point of view of SUSE's integrity and doing the right thing. So here we are. The conclusions are, LibreOffice continues to grow and hopefully execute. We are changing constantly. We like new things. If there are new ways of doing things that are better, we want to do them, right? So, maybe you have some ideas. Maybe you can get involved. You're more than welcome to get stuck in, to become a key member of the community and, hey, shape the future of office productivity. We have a market interesting product that moves other products. We can see people adopting in other products our features shortly after we're doing them. So, if you want to influence the world office market, we can do that together. Our code and feature set is much better. We are very diverse. There are lots of companies and individuals supporting. And thank you for your help. I mean, openSUSE has been a key part of this story. SUSE has invested a lot in the project, and we've done conferences and things together. Thank you for your help and your support. Ultimately, there's no way that I can do anything by myself, or we as a team can do it without your support and remembering our brand. It's, they say about Mozilla, it's said Mozilla, but it's pronounced Firefox or something, right? Or whatever. But you know what I'm saying? It's pronounced LibreOffice these days. That's all I say. So get people excited about free software. Get involved and help us. We'd love to have you work with us. And any questions? We're now at the end. Oh, I have the microphone. Let me pass it. Thank you. Thank you. You've been very patient. Good question, Wookie, because I have the embarrassing photos nearby.
Yeah, okay, I'll bear that in mind. Yeah, so when you set this up and started, there was, how sure were you that all those contributors were going to turn up? How scary was it going, do you think everyone's going to join, or is this going to fall flat on its face and will look silly?
Yeah, so when you consider that we were up against some pretty significant entrenched opposition, and yeah, we had 100 and some person company of full-time engineers we were effectively soft forking. It was a bit concerning. And subsequently, when another large company got involved with supporting that too, you're looking at $100 billion companies that you're competing against and effectively winning against, which is slightly surprising on one surface. On the other end, there are remarkably few people in the world that actually do the work. There are a huge number of people who are very interested in talking about it, but actually doing it is another thing. And luckily, many of the people that actually did stuff, like all of those Linux distributions, all of the packages, we knew would come with us. They were our friends. We worked with them. Red Hat. We were just much better on Linux. So we were confident that all of Linux would come. And then it was really about brand. The sad thing is that we have a great Office suite. For all engineers in this room, you need to go and look at the relative download numbers here. Because really brand, is driving people to buy something, that is, or download something that's inferior. And so there's still a challenge there, growing our Windows user base and brand awareness. So anything you can do to help is appreciated. But yeah, I was the only real one in the board that truly believed we would get a lot of developers. I was pleasantly surprised by how well we did. Some of the other people were like, whoa, what is going on here? So yeah, it was very frightening. And it turned out well, so thank God. I don't know, it's down to our great ability, but I do think there was a moment there where it was just the right thing to do. Like I say, boycott Novell and Novell, FSF and the OSI. There was just a lot of support and goodwill for many years. So yeah, it's exciting. Andrew, I'll repeat your question. Just go for it.
So when setting up TDF, what were the driving factors for you of, setting up in Germany or etc., rather than doing an EV or doing a 401c in the US or whatever? I mean, what drove your choice, effectively?
Sure. So politics is something like a sausage machine. And it doesn't perhaps reflect well to look terribly carefully at what's going on in the sausage machine. But let's lift the lid very, very quickly before we shut it again. So the best corporate legal advice said, don't incorporate in Germany. Like, if you asked the international lawyers, someone else, they said, go for a common law jurisdiction, the USA or the UK. I was in the UK. We were kept not incorporating in Germany. Like, there was a very long delay in this process. And at some stage, it came to a head, and I said to my co-board members to be, look, we need a deadline. We've got to do this. If we don't do it in 6 weeks, we will set one up in the UK anyway, right? Go for it. And one of the problems is in Germany, you need 50,000 euros, which you just keep in the bank for a foundation. To set up a foundation, you keep 50,000 euros on what is today a negative real rate of interest. So you need to go to people and say, please give me 50,000 euros. And they say, what will you do with it? And you say, we will put it in the bank where it will become less valuable. right? And probably be invested in Microsoft shares with it, right? I mean, that's the reality of international banking, right? And this, I thought, was a hard sell. Anyway, so the ultimatum was given, look, 6 weeks. Anyway, so the call went out then, donate us money, we need money to create a foundation in Germany. And I was convinced it wouldn't happen. And in the first 3 weeks or something, we raised 50,000 euros. In the subsequent 3 weeks, we raised, I don't know, we had easily enough. And so my cunning plan, was completely stymied. And so we set up in Germany, and there are pros and cons of every jurisdiction. There are great things about Germany, and there are, less positive things. But there's no really right answer. I would suggest that you use an EV instead of a Stiftung, generally, if you can.
So who gave you that legal advice of go here, go there, don't do this, don't do that?
That actually came from a very large blue chip American company who was at the time supportive. Yeah. yeah. So, I mean, one of the things I didn't present here is our financial picture today. So we don't have a Mozilla-style governance. In the Mozilla-style governance, where the board is elected by, tenure, they have been there for a long time, and also by another key criteria that they haven't made a donation 6 years ago to someone we don't like today. So those are the critical factors in the Mozilla project. But they do have hundreds of millions of dollars coming in, which they then spend on development. We don't have that. We have maybe approaching $1 million worth of donations from a very diverse set of contributors. Advisory board members, you saw there, contribute, but large numbers of people contribute as they download. They donate $10, 20 euros, 15 euros, this sort of thing, but it all adds up. And 1 million downloads a week, they don't have to give very much over 52 weeks to actually really support the project. And because of that, we can employ an executive director, Florian Effenberger, a release engineer who does all the releasing, QA engineer, another half a QA engineer, certification program, various other things, PR and website developers occasionally when we need them and so on. So that gives us a huge flexibility, some significant financial reserves, and I hope some depth. If we need to spend money, we can when we want to. Good question. Any other good questions? Yes, go for it.
Hello. How do you see the future with the other, say, OpenOffice product there is?
Is there? I don't know. So, you saw the volume of code that we incorporate from there on our contributor graph in terms of commits. There are differences, between styles of committing, obviously. I just, wish them all the best, really. We would love to have their code in our project. It would be great to work more constructively with them. Personally, I think it's a bit of a waste to have 2 projects. But yeah, let's see. There's everything to play for. They have a very valuable brand, which we collectively as a community spent years building, and that they control. It was sad to see that happen, I think.
So for the time being, you see at least 2 projects existing together at the same time?
Absolutely. I think that's likely for a while. And hey, check them both out,
Right. So let me follow up with another question. Why the choice of licensing, especially the MPL?
So that's a great question. The MPL is a weak copyleft license. It's a very weak copyleft license, such that a large blue chip company that we know of is actually able to use that license and able to distribute their under a proprietary product. So the MPL is effectively so weak as a copyleft. If you have contributed your code back, then you can ship under whatever license you like your binaries. So it's basically focused on getting people to contribute their code back, and after that, all bets are off. Now, that's a gross simplification, but if you want to ship LibreOffice under an Apache license, the binaries, you can do that today. And customers tend to consume binaries, not source code. So our concern was really to ensure that people contribute back, but not maybe constrain the binaries as much as, say, a stronger copyleft license like the GPL or the LGPL would do. So it's kind of a compromise license that's designed to be attractive to other people and include as many as possible. And why a copyleft license? That's a really good question. Personally, I'm a big believer in the copyleft for its community building properties. We have many people that contribute to LibreOffice, and it's pretty clear when you join that you're expected to contribute your changes. I mean, it's there in the license, but it's there in the culture. And that's important. And sometimes, you know, like we sell consulting. So I have some guy that wants to invest, say, 50,000 euros in LibreOffice, and he wants to do it almost altruistically. Like, I want this feature for my product, but I'm really, really concerned that other people don't take it, turn it into something proprietary, and not contribute back. You know, if I'm going to put stuff in, I want to get their changes too. I want to work together with other people. And you get that in an email. It's like, well, you know, it's really important to us that it's like this. And I say, well, that's fine. That's how LibreOffice is set up. This is how our license does that. We agree with you, you know. this is how it should be. People collaborating together. So if you want to do a proprietary thing on the side, that's fine. But the core changes we want contributed back. So I think it's a key tool to build community. It's a key tool to make the situation clear. And yeah, I mean, like, why do anything different? Does that help?
Yes, a little. I have to admit I'm not very familiar with the MPL itself.
Okay.
So I was thinking whether the LGPL was only a shallow, well, say shell for people, or to attract people and say, well, look, it's LGPL, but in fact, you know, it's the MPL.
I think the reality is you're right to a degree. So the MPL is actually a quad license. But I think a corporation that wants to be evil would use the weakest choice of license. And so I think the MPL represents the maximum extreme of how far we're willing to compromise that. Yeah. But the MPL is a quad license. So for various reasons, which, you know, are too tedious to go into, it's a LGPL, it's a GPL, and it's an AGPL license. So any MPL code you can turn into those other licenses. Okay? So it's, yeah, pick your license. Yeah.
All right, cool.
One more question. Perfect. Okay, and then we can go for it.
So you talked about branding, and
Sure.
then you talked about community. So from what I can see, other than big conferences like FOSDEM or in local conferences, you don't have any community talk, not any talks from the community. That's what I mean.
Okay.
So how is this working for you? I mean, so in the state that you have to strengthen your branding and stuff like that, I don't see any talks of you around for LibreOffice, at least in universities, because I love to read programs of other conferences. So
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I'm primarily a developer. If you want to go and talk about LibreOffice at conferences, have my slides. They're all CC0. We can help with funding if you need to travel to places. If you want to promote LibreOffice with stickers and stuff, we can send you collateral. It's not a problem. One of the things we're slightly averse to is handing out job titles. So in the OpenOffice days, there was rampant job title handing out. So Luis Suarez Potts would go around the world appointing, blessing people, laying his hands on them and saying, you are now the ambassador of the official Ultra project lead ambassador, you know, and generally we don't do that. We try and avoid titles.
So if someone wants to do something like that,
Do
just
something
jumps,
That's right.
send you emails,
And you'll appear in the pictures, and you'll be, you know, on the website and become a member and whatever. And you're most welcome to promote LibreOffice. Of course, maybe it's your geography, but you know, we do promote LibreOffice quite heavily. The other thing is that there are only a certain number of developers. So in terms of attracting students, you know, maybe we have 100 committers a month, but mentoring people is hard. You know.
This question, it was sent to me by email by some guys from some universities that want to talk about LibreOffice, because at least in Greek universities, teachers don't even know LibreOffice. So,
Okay, perfect. Well,
you know,
tell your professor. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been very good. Take care.